Okay,
wake up
well,
first.
I got 2 minutes early.
Yeah. So, okay. Look who's back. David Cohen is back and better than ever.
Hi,
Ralph
David.
misses you, David.
How are you?
How you doing, Jay David? We miss you here at the class.
On a Friday, he's not there on a Friday.
Morning, Joshua. Okay, but David is here. Okay, David, we're at a it's always a good spot. We're at Yutet Amabase 19b in a new Mishnah. So in 19b4, so the Mishnah states the following. The last thing we said was about the Korban Pesach, that you're allowed to go ahead right before Shabbat. You're allowed to go ahead and take the meat, the lamb, which is the Korban Pesach, and you could go ahead and place it into the oven to be roasted right before Shabbat. You put it right before Shabbat. Even though we said in general, food has to be cooked a certain amount before Shabbat in order for you to go ahead and leave it there before Shabbat, because the rabbis were concerned you might come to stoke the coals. But because because there were a lot of people that were counted onto this Korban Pesach, many people were counted. It's not one person to eat this lamb, right? The whole family would join in, and if the family was not big enough, the neighbors would join in for the Korban Pesach. So therefore, because of that, there were many people, and the many people would remind each other, and that would make sure that no one would make a mistake and forget and stoke the fire to raise the temperature of the fire in Shabbat. Correct, David? We're not afraid of that when there are a number of people around that will remind each other. Now, the Gemara continues. Now, this is where David comes into play. It says, specifically, David, Umachizin et ha'or b'medurat beit hamokad. They had a room by the Beit HaMikdash in the courtyard, which was the heating room. Why was this the heating room? Because David was walking around without shoes and socks when he was doing his service in the temple, and marble floor, and it got cold. And there was a room there that was heated up constantly with fire. There was a fire going. There was a fire, like a little bonfire going in that room, in order that the Kohanim could go ahead and warm themselves up. Morning, Levi. The Gemara Rashi brings down how they learned it out from a certain pasuk, that there should not be any interruption, any mechitza, anything separating between the Kohen and the ground. And therefore, if you would be having socks on or shoes on, there would be something separating between the Kohen and the ground, and therefore the Kohen had to go ahead and walk barefoot. But it's an amazing thing is that even though the Kohen was walking barefoot, but as sensitivity to the Kohen, so he had a place that he could go in to warm up. It's called actually the fire chamber. It's called the Beit HaMokad. And the reason why it's called the Beit HaMoked, it's the fire chamber because there was fire always burning there. Now, when you're going ahead and you're lighting the wood that's going to be burning in this fire room for the Kohanim to warm themselves up, so you're allowed to go ahead and you only have to allow the wood to get a little bit on fire, meaning to say, Rashi says, ma'at only a small amount of fire has caught onto the wood that's in this fire room, that's in the courtyard, and the wood would continuously burn, meaning, let's say you started the fire, right? So the fire is on 1%, 2% of the wood, that's good enough. And you could leave, meaning to say you don't have to make sure Friday afternoon when you want to go ahead and light, let's say you need to light some of the wood, you bring in wood into to this room, and we need to make sure that the fire gets stronger. So you add a certain amount of wood, and that wood you only have to make sure that starts burning. If you don't have to make sure, well, and now the question is maybe it's not going to, maybe you might, why aren't you concerned that the Kohanim are going to go ahead and maybe move the wood around to make sure that the fire catches very well, it continues very well. And maybe the Kohanim might want to get the fire stronger, a little bit more heat in the room. We're not concerned about that because the Kohanim are Zrizinheim. They are very diligent in their service in the temple, and they will not forget, and they will be on top of their game, and they don't have to worry that they're going to go ahead and do something and move the wood around to to make it more on fire, because the Kohanim are on top of their game. Even if it's not burning perfectly, you don't have to worry that the Kohanim are going to do something to play around with the wood on Shabbat. However, when it's not Kohanim, when it's not Kohanim, then the Mishnah says there's a different level that needs to be reached. Now we are on Chaf Amar Aleph 28. Ubigvulim, when you're outside the Beit HaMikdash, so there, sarich shetochos ha'or berubo, the fire has to catch to the majority. The Gemara will explain what exactly does that majority mean, but literally means, it sounds like that the majority of the wood has to be caught on fire. If only a small amount of wood, Mr. Haber, is on fire, that will not be enough, because maybe you're afraid you might come to poke it, move it around, right? But if already the majority of the wood is already lit, that means it's lighting beautifully. If the majority is already lit, so you don't have to worry that you're going to come to intervene on the fire and make some movements and stoke the fire or make the fire higher. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Rabbi Yehuda says, by the way, if you're dealing with coals, you're making a barbecue or certain thing, we're making coals, when you have food on a coal, or the fire if you're using coals to heat up the room, not wood, then any amount of the coals gets caught on fire. Once a coal is ignited, even a small amount of the coal, even if it's not the majority of the coal, so he said the coal, it usually does not go out, and it just usually gets stronger. The fire continues to grow, and therefore you will not need to stoke the flame of those coals, or stoke the coals, move the coals around, and therefore you would not be a problem if it was a coal fire. And there's a letter Aleph which takes to the Shulchan Aruch Reish Nun Hey, which seems to indicate that the halacha would follow Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. So taking out Reish Nun Hey, Sif Beis. So it's very interesting that in the Shulchan Aruch, it's a Yesh Omrim. It's not that it's in the Shulchan Aruch that everybody agrees that the law follows Rabbi Yehuda. Rather, there are those that say that when it comes to pechamim, when it comes to coals, even if the fire only took hold of a small amount, a very small amount of the coal, it is permitted because the fire keeps on moving and you don't have to intervene. Okay. And the Shulchan Aruch states, if you want to make a little bonfire, you want to make a thing from wood before Shabbat, you have to make sure that it's lit well enough that the flame will go up by itself without any help of other. You don't have to. You wouldn't have to. You have to bring other wood, little pieces of wood to help it burn. That it's just going on its own. And then the Shulchan Aruch talks about if it's one piece of wood, how the fire has to take hold of the majority of the thickness and the circumference of the wood. We'll see that more in the Gemara. And if you did not burn that much, if you did not reach the level that you required to make sure the level of the fire before Shabbat, you cannot use that fire on Shabbat. You can't warm yourself up by that fire on Shabbat. Because in the Chavetz Chaim says, even if it kept on going properly, but you violated the words of the rabbis, which the rabbi said you should not do this. You should not have made such a fire before Shabbat. Therefore, you can't use it on Shabbat. And the reason why you can't use it on Shabbat, Shulchan Aruch says, because maybe you would go ahead and stoke the coals in order that the flame should go up very well. And if it was lit properly, then you could warm yourself by that fire. You could use the fire for light purposes. You want to read by that fire. Okay, that is just very interesting. A little bit of the Shulchan Aruch on the matter. Okay, so now the Gemara asks a very big question. We said that you cannot roast the meat before Shabbat. And some say you can't cook the meat. Some have the text before Shabbat unless it cooked before the Shabbat. Now the question was, if you're going to put up food, you're going to cook food before Shabbat, it has to have cooked beforehand. The Gemara understands that it doesn't mean that it has to cook the whole thing before Shabbat. That's what it seems like the Gemara understands. The question is, how much needs to be cooked before Shabbat? That's the question here in the Gemara. V'kama. Amar Rabbi Elazar. So Rabbi Elazar says, Amar Rav, Kedei sheyitzula mibod yom k'meichel ben desai. It has to be lit before Shabbat. The amount of cooking that is the food for the robbers. The robbers is a terrible thing, right? It's a terrible thing to rob, to steal. But the robbers, when they were always on the move, like the mafia, right? They have to go. They can't wait in one place. So they would cook food and then they would take it the shortest amount of time that was edible, they would eat it, and then they would go to the next place. They were afraid they were going to get caught. It's a terrible thing to steal, right? Right, young man? And morning, Emmanuel. So once it reached, good to see you. Once it reached the level of Michael ben Drasai, that some say it's a third cooked, some say if it's a half cooked. Meaning if something takes an hour to be cooked, some say as long as it reached 20 minutes, it was cooked for 20 minutes. Others say 30 minutes. I think the Rambam says 30 minutes, half the amount of time. Rashi says a third. Then once it reached that level, so it means it's reached the level that it's already edible before Shabbat. So you don't have to worry that maybe he's going to come and stoke those coals on Shabbat. If it did not reach that level, let's say it reached 25% before Shabbat. So 25% of the cooking before Shabbat is not edible. Nobody would eat that. Even the robbers wouldn't eat it. It's too raw. So since they wouldn't eat it, we would be afraid that maybe you're going to come to stoke it. Now let's see in Shimon Reish and Dalet, Sif Bet in the. By the way, David, the best thing on Shabbat, Mr. Haber and Manny and Ralph, is when you cook, the food is fully cooked before Shabbat. You avoid a lot of issues if you make sure, if your wife makes sure, if you're married, and when you get married, that the food is fully cooked before Shabbat. then you avoid a lot of issues. So let's see what it says in the Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch says you can't roast um, you can't roast an onion, eggs, meat on top of coals unless it was roasted on both sides. The amount of time of these robbers would take to uh, to cook, he goes with the more strict opinion because of Shabbat. He goes with the Rambam's opinion, which is a half that it reached a half of cooking. Because he says over here, since you put it on the coals, you are concerned. He says that you want it to roast very fast. Therefore, we're afraid you're going to stoke it. But when it roasted the amount of half or a half, we're not afraid that you're going to come to stoke it. That is that opinion of the Shulchan Aruch. We'll have to see more about this as we go along.
I don't understand the whole concept with the robbers.
Very good. So the robbers are just a way to indicate what is the point that a food becomes edible to be eaten. The way to know that is that there was the group of people that the robbers teach us what is the point. They're only using the robbers as a sign to identify for us what is the first and earliest time you could go ahead and the food is edible to be eaten. That's what the robbers come in. The robbers show us the average person does not eat food which is half cooked. You eat food when it's fully cooked. But the robbers just show us that there is a group of people out there that would eat food that's half cooked, and that has an effect to us who are not robbers, but how our mindset is regarding food. How concerned that we are for the food, how much is our mind focused on the food that we might come to get nervous and poke the food and stoke the coals. So that's where the robbers come in. The robbers are just an identification for us of when people would start eating the food. And therefore, we see from them that a half cooked is considered already edible. So therefore, the people who are not robbers, they are less concerned if they have the food already half cooked before Shabbat, they know that the food is now edible. How do they? Because it's half cooked. Because that's what robbers would eat it. That means the average person, if necessary, if they would be stuck, they would eat it as well. And therefore, they're not as focused on the food. They know the food has reached a certain level of edibility, if there is such a word.
So you're saying that the robbers are indication that the food is half cooked if they take it.
Right. It's showing that the food is considered edible. Half cooked is considered edible. That's what the robbers show us. Edible in a very rare stage, and that therefore we could go ahead and be confident that we don't have to be as concerned that we're going to poke at the fire. Itmanami, the Gemara says, Itmanami, Amar Rab Asi, Amar Rab Yochanan, we find somewhere else that half cooked, or this Michael ben Drusai, which we're identifying as half cooked or third cooked, it's considered cooked. Where do we find that? Itmanami, we find Amar Rab Asi, Amar Rab Yochanan, Kol shehu k'Michael ben Drusai, any food that reached the level of Michael ben Drusai, ein bo mishum bishulei nochrim. It's not subject now to the prohibition of cooked by a Gentile. we have a law that states that a non-Jew cannot cook food for us, right? Even though the food is 100% kosher, 100%, everything is kosher. Even we hold, even in your own house, a person has a maid in their house. The maid cannot cook the food for the Jew in the house. The Jew has to be involved in the cooking.
We're talking about Shabbat or just in regular?
All the time, all the
Okay.
time, all the time. People have maids in the house. The woman of the house, the wife, the Jewish woman, is supposed to be putting the food in the oven. And once she puts the food in, meaning the fire is on, she puts the food in the oven, then you can have the cleaning lady or the maid take care of the food after that. Because the Jewish woman, if you're Ashkenaz, we just have to turn on the Jew has to just turn on the oven. They don't have to put the food into the oven. But the Sephardim are more strict. The Sephardim hold that the Jewish woman has to put the food on the fire. If you'll notice, at a Brit, when you go to a Brit, a circumcision, and they serve eggs, and a lot of these Britim today, things are a little more fancy than the old days. They make eggs on the scrambled eggs. Good morning, Solomon. Right, Solomon? They're making the scrambled eggs at the Brit, and what the Sephardim make sure there's the rabbi is the one who actually puts the pan on the fire. All right. Ashkenazim have it easy. That's the rabbi just has to turn on the fire. And as long as we're involved, the Jew is involved in the process, that's enough for the Ashkenazim. The Sephardim require more than that. Avadi Yosef, Eliyahu Hanavi is over there. Yeah, right. Yeah, you're right. So that is the story. Now, what's the idea? What's the background? The background is the rabbis were concerned. They want to protect us. They want to protect us from intermarriage. So one of the ways they protect from intermarriage is that you really hit a person's heart with food. And if a non-Jew will be cooking for me, for the Jew, I might feel feelings of closeness, comfortability, and it might lead to levels of maybe let's marry. Let me, she's a very good cook, or he's a good cook. His daughter will be a good cook, and there was concern. There's great concern of getting too close to the non-Jewish world, and leading to intermarriage, because it's not a business thing. It's not a business deal. Cooking is not a business deal. Cooking food is more of a pleasurable, social type of activity. And therefore, the rabbi said there's something called bishul akum. If the guy cooked it, I cannot eat it. Meaning, food that I can eat without the guy's intervention, it's no problem if the guy warms it up, right? You go on an airplane, right? You fly El Al, or you fly Delta, whatever you're flying, and you ordered a kosher meal, right? So that kosher meal was pre-cooked. It was cooked by a Jew, by this kosher agency that gave certification. What is the non-Jew doing, David? They're warming it up. They're just heating it up. So warming up food that's previously cooked is not a problem, because the guy did not cook it for me. They're just warming it up for me. It's an insignificant type of activity that there's no problem for me to benefit and use. But if the guy cooked the food, even if it was totally kosher, that's a problem. Look, now, many people might not realize that there's a problem with the maid in their house. There are people that never heard of such a thing, never heard there's a problem for their maid to put the food in the oven and put on the oven. What I would say for the Sephardim, if I could be bold, say the following. David, you want to hear a bold statement from an Ashkenaz rabbi for Sephardim? If the Sephardim are not yet, if the people who are not keeping this law for whatever reason, maybe they should first try the easy way of the Ashkenazim and then eventually go the Sephardi route. because sometimes maybe if it's too much for them to 1, 2, 3 to adjust to their halacha, if I could say it like that. You hear what I'm saying, David? I mean, the Ashkenaz way would be just turn on the oven. The woman also has to turn on the fire, and the guy could put the food into the oven. Start with that, and then we'll eventually graduate to actually that the Jewish woman will put the food in the oven. The fire is on, and she puts the food into the oven. But I don't know if everyone's ready to that level yet. Dave, is that a good idea, David, or not? You know what I'm saying? I think maybe we could tell the Sfardim we're not yet doing this, but I think this is easy for the woman in the house. You know what? You just turn on the oven. The woman now once the Jewish woman turns on the oven, the non-Jew could, according to the Ashkenaz halacha, she could adjust it. She could adjust the temperature because the Jew, has been involved in the heat. If you made it 300, she makes it 350, but as long as she doesn't turn off the oven and then put it back on, the issue would be she can't turn off the oven. In a lot of the places, the job of the mashgiach, of the one who's supervising, is to make sure that if the fire goes out, you call the rabbi when the fire goes out. You know what I'm saying? In a lot of these restaurants, a lot of these kosher delight type of places. You know what I mean? These type of places, when they're dealing with a lot of food, so the fire goes out, the rabbi is called to reignite the fire. That's the main job of a lot of the mashgichim, is to make sure that he turns on the fire. Okay, so next time you go to a Brit and you see them make scrambled eggs, scrambled eggs is interesting. Because scrambled eggs is an item of food that's considered that people don't generally eat. You don't eat raw. Look who's back. Good morning, David. People don't eat scrambled eggs raw, and therefore you can't have the non-Jew. The non-Jew can't make you scrambled eggs, David. He can't make you scrambled eggs. That's called bishul akum. So therefore, you'll see at the Brit, you'll see how the rabbi who's supervising is involved. If it's an Ashkenaz Brit, they just turn on the pan, the fire for the pan. They're the ones who make the fire. And if they're Sfardim, they're really supposed to do a higher level, actually put the food onto the fire. So we're talking about, so here we're saying, if a Jew cooked the food, the amount of Meichel ben Drasai, which is either the Jew cooked it a third of the way, or half. There's different opinions. What's called the third half? We said if something takes an hour to cook, the Jew cooked it for 20 minutes. It cooked for 20 minutes by the Jew, or to cook for a half hour. The Rambam is a more strict opinion. It cooked for a half hour, and then the fire went out. Then the non-Jew took over the cooking. He put on the fire from there on. It's not a problem because you had already reached cooking by the Jew, because it's already considered labeled cooked regarding this law, at least. Not, of course, a food that's half cooked, you're not going to say you could cook it on Shabbat to make it from half to full. But regarding this law of is it subject to the law of bishul akum, that the non-Jew is cooking the food for you, right, David? There's a law that says that a non-Jew can't cook for me. They can't cook for me. The rabbis didn't want that level of socialization between Jews and non-Jews, concerned of intermarriage concern. The rabbis with great foresight. And if as long as the Jew cooked at a certain level amount, then it's not subject to this issue. Is that clear? We were talking about people who have maids in their house, and we're saying that the maid is not supposed to be doing the cooking. And for Ashkenazic homes, the woman of the house, the wife, just turns on the oven. And then the maid could do whatever she could put it in. It's not a problem. For Sephardi homes, they should require a higher level. The Jewish woman should actually put the food into the oven. But I said, David, I went on record, hope it's all right. I said that if the Sephardim who are not familiar with this law yet, they should first go the Ashkenaz route before we jump to the Sephardi route. Start easy. I think start easy. Isn't that? I think that's the way to do it. Say, Tell the woman, you know what? Just you tell your wife, honey, you turn on the oven. We have the cleaning lady, we have the maid, whatever she is. You turn on the oven. So at least you filled all those rabbis that say it's good enough. And then one day maybe we'll graduate to the next level. That's my opinion. By the way, you should know interesting. The Jew? Right, right. They just have to right. They'll actually put the food in the oven. They'll actually put the food in the oven. You know, Ravad Yosef has has an interesting question. You have it down. You know, he had a radio show, a radio program, a radio show, where every Friday, right, Mr. Haber, before Shabbat, he spoke on the radio a halachic issue, and then it was transcribed, and they made a Safra book out of it. So he spoke about, can a Sephardi person eat in an Ashkenaz restaurant? Because the Ashkenazim are not, the standard is lower regarding this law. Because the Ashkenaz restaurant, the rabbi, the mashgiach, the supervisor, he just turns on the fire. And he has a good day, you know. He turns on the fire, he stays on the side, and the non-Jews are putting the food into the oven. But that's not the standard of the Sfaradim. The Sfaradim say that's not good enough. The Sfaradi halacha says you have to put the food into the oven, the Jew. The mashgiach would have to be busy taking the chicken and putting it into the oven. Right? So he has an allowance. He gives a whole discussion why in a restaurant, whatever the explanation is, but there are leniencies under, you know. So I'm just saying, and we have to, you know, I'm just saying. So sometimes we will. It's not like the Ashkenazi rabbi's opinion. It's not like it doesn't exist. You know what I'm saying? Just like when you have this Sephardi opinion and the Ashkenazim don't follow it, it doesn't mean the Sephardi opinion doesn't exist. It's an opinion. We might not follow it. It's not like it. You see what I'm saying? That's why, Dave. That's what I'm saying. Even if we take that, you know, and because even Ravad Yosef, one of his, he puts into the equation of the discussion of a Sephardi eating in an Ashkenaz restaurant, you know, reserve cut. I presume reserve cut is an Ashkenaz restaurant. I don't know. Who are the owners? Good morning, Gary. Are they doing it according to Sephardi? I don't know that they're doing it according to Sephardi halacha. But he uses the Ashkenaz opinion. It's part of the cholent, so to speak, to come to the conclusion that you be allowed to eat. Gary would be allowed to eat in an Ashkenaz restaurant, even though their cooking standards might not be the highest standard that regarding putting the food in the oven, that the Sfardim require that the Jew should put the food in the oven, not the Gentile. But he uses it, you know, to help allow the Sfardim to eat in Ashkenaz restaurants. Okay, so here the Gemara said, if it reached the level of Michael ben Drusai, ein bo mishum bishulei akum. Once it was cooked by the Jew, either half cooked or third cooked, based the Rambam and Rashi have different opinions how much it has to be, what's called this Michael ben Drusai. But once it reached, let's say Rambam says half cooked, then it's not a problem if the guy finishes the cooking. The fire went out after half cooked. Now the Gentile put on the fire, that will be all right. It's not considered a problem. Now, Tanya, we learned in the Breita. Hananya Omer. Hananya says, Kol shehu k'Michael ben Drusai. If a food reached the level of Michael ben Drusai, which is, we said, either a third cooked or a half cooked. We said before, if something takes an hour to be cooked, if it was cooked for 20 minutes or a half hour, the Shulchan Aruch takes the more stringent opinion. I saw one commentary said was Shabbat was strict, that it has to be cooked at least for half the cooking, has to be at least half cooked before Shabbat. Then you're allowed to leave it on before Shabbat. Mutar la'ashoto agabe kira. You're allowed to leave it on in the oven, because once it reached half cooked before Shabbat, we're not afraid you're going to go ahead and play around and stoke the coals, stoke the fire, because it already reached a certain level of cooking before Shabbat. If it did not reach that level of cooking before Shabbat, let's say, good morning, Dr. Kevin. If it only reached 25%, or according to the Rambam, 45%, it didn't reach 50% before Shabbat, excuse me, we're concerned you might come to play around with the fire on Shabbat. Here's a very interesting protection of the rabbis. The rabbis don't want people to sin. So the rabbis are here to help us. So they go ahead and they create certain laws, offenses of protection. Just like the rabbis say, don't handle the pen on Shabbat. You might write with the pen on Shabbat, right? Don't handle the phone. You don't handle certain things on Shabbat. You might come to do a sin. So the rabbis are concerned you might come to stoke the fire, increase the flame by stoking the fire. And therefore the rabbi said you should make sure that the food has reached a certain level of cooking before Shabbat. So now you're not so concerned about the food. The food is cooking well, it'll be ready not so long. It won't take so long to be ready. And therefore we're not afraid you're going to get nervous and get busy in the kitchen and passing by and stoking the coals and forgetting about Shabbat and playing around with the fire. If the food is cooked, let's say over half before Shabbat, and now the food is in the oven, so technically you should be able to take the food out. You can take the food off. Right. So that gets into different. Right. So therefore there are Shabbat modes on ovens today. You could set it to a mode that certain ovens that it will not, the temperature will not change the temperature. I would say most probably you can allow the guy to, because you need it for Shabbat, you can allow the guy to pull it out. I don't know that every time. I don't think that every week you should have a situation that it's going to be, you're going to rely on the Gentile. People, we shouldn't set things up on a regular basis for. No, you can't stoke it. You can't stoke it. If it's third and half cooked, then you're allowed to put the food, meaning you can leave it on before Shabbat. The question is, if it's not a third or half cooked, I would have to remove it before Shabbat. Meaning, if the food is, what'd you say? Because we're afraid if I leave. We're here. The issue, David, is if I leave the food on, I might come to do a sin. I might come to poke it. So the question is, at what point can I leave the food on before Shabbat? Now, if you cook, the best thing is always have the food fully cooked before Shabbat. You avoid a lot of issues. People shouldn't be. Right. But if you didn't cook it a certain level and only cooked less than, let's say, half, according to then you would not be able to leave it. You would have to take it off before Shabbat. You're stuck. You can't have that food. You can't leave that food on before Shabbat. No. If it's over half cooked, you still can't play with it because you are still increasing. You're increasing the fire. You're making right. It's two issues. The food is becoming more cooked, which should be a problem because you're adding to the cooking by stoking it. And there's a different issue. Is also the issue of fire by stoking the coals, by moving the fire around. If a person if a person moves the knob from 300 to 400, you've increased the fire. So there's two concerns. There's two issues. The fire becoming larger, which is on Shabbat. You can't make a fire on Shabbat, so that's a problem. And then besides, you can't make the fire on Shabbat. You're adding to the cooking, right? But you can't even leave. But you can't leave it. Good morning, welcome. But you can't leave it there if it did not reach a certain level of cooking. But once it reached that, you're ready before Shabbat. It was ready, half cooked. Then you can leave it there because we'll see the halacha as we learn the Gemara. Because we're not afraid, you're going to go ahead and stoke it. No, you can't because then you're increasing the cooking of that food. Right, over half cooked, right? But because I'm cooking it more. Meaning, if on Shabbat I myself am moving it around, that means that I am involved in the cooking on Shabbat. I went and made it cook from a half to a whole. It's a vow, right? When I put it on before Shabbat, I don't touch it. I'm not Shabbat. It happened by itself. I didn't do the cooking. Just like you turn on an air conditioner before Shabbat, you turn on a light. I'm not involved on Shabbat on it. Okay. So the Gemara says, and this opinion in the Gemara says, once it reached the level of Michael ben Drusai, mutu la shoto agabe kira, afal pi she'en grufa ketuma. So this opinion, Hananya holds that you could leave it on the fire even though you didn't cover the fire. See, like Gary was talking about, we have the blech. See, the point of the blech, the metal on top of the fire, that covers the fire. That's going to remind me not to play around with the fire. And this opinion holds that even if I did not cover the fire with this metal, but as long as it's covered, the fire is covered, as long as it reaches a certain level of cooking for Shabbat, we don't have to be concerned that I'm going to stoke it. We'll see more next week, more about these laws. Have a great day, everybody.
Shabbat shalom, Rabbi.
You have a great Shabbat, everybody. Good to see you, Ralph. Good to see you, Asaf. All the best. Ralph, David wants to know when you're coming back.
Could be next week.
He says hopefully next week.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Because you're not saying a date, he has to make sure he comes every day. David.
Came that though. Very good.
Yeah, Rabbi Feinstein's very good. Very good, right? Sweet man, right?
Very good, sweet.
Thank you.